There's this little piece of land, less than a square mile, that everyone seems to want a piece of. Jerusalem, the old city at least, is seen as holy to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. That's nearly half the world's population. Around 3 million people visit Jerusalem every year. But if you haven't been, or if you have and you'd like to go again, I have some good news for you. A group of filmmakers spent 5 years making a movie about Jerusalem. It's shot in 3D for IMAX with aerial footage and rare access to holy sites and festivals, all to make you feel right there. Taran Davies is one of the producers of the film called Jerusalem, and he joins me in the studio. Taran, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
This is the most fought over piece of land in history, but your film doesn't talk about the conflict at all. Why not?
It's such an important question. The whole approach in the making of this film was to come at the subject of Jerusalem from a completely fresh perspective. I've grown up in a world, whenever I think about this ancient city, I think about it in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What we wanted to do was to actually get behind that, to understand what is the attachment to this city. Why do people care about it so much? Why do Jews, Christians, and Muslims feel so strongly about this ancient, sacred city? And that's what we wanted to get after. And in a sense, you can look at Jerusalem from this perspective as a celebration. This is a city that over half of the people on the planet are in love with, in one way or another. And that's what we wanted to go after. How is it so beloved?
So you were the one that thought of making this film about Jerusalem. Why did that come into your head? Why did you say, oh, let's do Jerusalem?
For me, this has been a journey, I suppose, that I have been on for my life of travel and adventure and filmmaking. So the films that I've made have taken me from places like Siberia, the Caucasus, Central Asia, Mecca. And if at one point in my life all the roads led to Mecca for me, once at Mecca where I made an IMAX film, they then moved on to Jerusalem. Where else could we go but Jerusalem?
It was the next logical film.
It was
in
the
your
next
progression.
logical step. And for me, what was so important is to be able to explore this extraordinary city that is home to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and have the opportunity to come to understand the other. Rather, that's what my journey has always been about, is to go to places that I personally know really little about, and maybe other people don't know so much about. But Jerusalem, there is nothing like.
The narrator says that Jerusalem, quote, binds together the hopes of the world. What does that mean?
For thousands of years, I mean, if you think that there's been human habitation recorded in Jerusalem for almost 5,000 years now, and if you think that for thousands of years, Jews, Christians, and Muslims have been living together in this crucible, inside these ancient city walls, there are 3 of the most sacred spots on earth to these people. This is a place where the Jews believe God founded the earth, where Abraham prepared to sacrifice his son, where King Solomon built the first temple. This is the place where Christians believe that Christ was crucified and resurrected. This is the place where Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. And all these different communities have been living within the ancient city of Jerusalem for thousands of years, and for many stretches of time have done so in a peaceful way.
And so many people feel closest to God in that spot, which is less than a square mile.
Well, as they say, this city is the closest place on earth to God. And that is what you experience when you go there. And when we traveled there in the film Jerusalem, it's why this ancient city, I mean, how could this tiny city that's located in this remote, barren outpost, essentially, with no great body of water and no great river, how could it be that this tiny place is the most fought over piece of land in history? And why do so many people love it? And so how has it been able to survive through 118 conflicts and 44 conquests? And it was completely destroyed twice, yet each time it was rebuilt. People loved it and rebuilt it in their own image. And that's what we explore in the film Jerusalem.
Taran Davies is in the studio with me. He's a producer and co-founder of Cosmic Picture. He's one of the producers for the 3D film called Jerusalem. You choose 3 teenage girls to tell the story. One's a Jew, one's a Christian, one's a Muslim. How did you pick them, and why did you decide to do it that way?
This is about coming at one of the most storied cities on earth. The story of Jerusalem has been told in how many books? How much have we heard about it? We want to do this in a way that no one has ever experienced before. So you have the medium that we chose, 3D and IMAX and the giant screen technology. But we also wanted to tell the story in a different way too, from the perspective of young people. After all, the young people represent our future. And at the same time, who really knows what your average Jerusalemite thinks about life in Jerusalem? Normally, when we hear stories, it's an expert and a scholar who we have many of them attached to this project to advise us. But who has heard their stories? What does it mean to be a young person living in Jerusalem? What is their future like? And that's what we were after here. And then in this effort to find the perfect kids to tell their story, quite by accident, as one does, you gravitate towards those you think have the best story, have the greatest character, and so on. And it turned out that these 3 young girls, Farah, Revital, Nadia, were just the most wonderful people. And it was just clear that it had to be their story. But then you have this film about the ancient city of Jerusalem told from the perspective of 3 young girls. Now, I haven't experienced that before. What we just wanted to do was to be able to tell the story of Jerusalem from the perspective of a young Muslim person, a young Jewish person, and a young Christian person, and understand without judgment what it means, what it means to them.
I assume that they work together on this film. How did they get along?
Well, I'm not sure they did work together on this film.
So they didn't interact, the 3 girls?
Well, you'd have to go and see the film itself to
no,
know.
I know that on the film itself, but I mean the girls themselves, even behind the cameras, they weren't interacting.
Well, this is the great thing, and it's part of the mystery and wonder of Jerusalem is that you have these 3 young girls who, if you go and see the film, you will maybe find it difficult to tell them apart. And they live mere footsteps from each other inside Jerusalem, yet they live very much in separate worlds. And one of the really exciting, and for what we learned as the filmmakers as we went through this project, Daniel Ferguson, our director and writer, took each of the girls to the old city of Jerusalem and walked through the same place together with each of them separately and asked them to tell him, what does this place mean to you? And for each of them, though they could be in the same place, their stories were completely different. Their attachment to their love was for a completely different reason. So they had different stories for the same stones. And they were unaware of the other stories. So the Muslim didn't know why the Christian liked this, the Jew didn't know why this, the Christian didn't know why this. And that was so exciting, to be able to look at the same thing from three different perspectives. And to realize that the people who live closest together don't know the other's story.
So at the end of the movie, the Christian girl says this. She says, "I hope we have the courage to meet the people who are living right next to us." And then she adds, "Maybe not yet." So it's this hopeful thing of, maybe we can all meet. I mean, they're living in such close quarters, but maybe it's not the right time.
I think we have to leave that for the audience to judge how they feel about that. I think our work as the filmmakers, and I must say Daniel Ferguson in particular as our director, to get that right so that the ending of this film is truthful and authentic for the girls and for the film is so critical. Because the thing about IMAX documentaries or giant screen films is that while they're all about big picture and the spectacle, and boy, don't get me wrong, I mean, this is a thrill ride through the Holy Land like you've never seen.
It is, I'm sure.
But there's an intimacy to hearing the voices of these girls on these speakers in these auditoriums where you really feel like you're connecting with them, and any note of inauthenticity will be registered by the audience.
The film we're discussing is called Jerusalem. It's a 3D IMAX film. One of the producers, Taran Davies, is in the studio with me. He's also co-founder of Cosmic Picture. The old city of Jerusalem is divided into unequal quarters. Do any of the different quarters intermingle at all?
Yes, very much so. There's constant intermingling, particularly amongst the Christian and Muslim communities.
Though the Christian community is extremely small. It's like 2%.
That's correct, and getting smaller. One of the wonders of Jerusalem is that as much as I love Rome and many other cities like it, you go and visit, and it's a museum town to a certain degree. Here, these ancient buildings and sacred sites, one of the most important churches in Christendom, the Western Wall Plaza. These are full of people. Rituals go on there, ancient rituals that have been going on for 3,000 years.
They're actually worshiping.
They are actually worshiping. And so when you go there, you're going into real people's lives and into these ancient rituals that really no one has the opportunity to see. I mean, very, very few people have the opportunity to see. And what is so wonderful is that it's all intermingled. If you could look down upon the city of Jerusalem, you would see on any given day, the Jews on the way to the Western Wall Plaza, the Christians going along the Via Dolorosa, the Way of Sorrow, towards the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where they believe that, or many believe that Christ was crucified and buried. And the Muslims going to pray on the great stone platform that they call Al-Aqsa, where the golden dome of the rock stands, and which the Jews call the Temple Mount. So there's constant currents like rivers moving through these through this ancient city, and at the same time you have these surprising, wonderful stories that a Muslim family for several hundred years is the one that opens each morning the doors to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and every night at 9 o'clock locks it. A Muslim family opening and closing, the only ones allowed to do it, a Christian church every day, still to this day for thousands of years. These are some of the wonderful stories that we hope that Jerusalem will share.
Well, speaking about that Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you spent the night inside that church?
One of the great lock-ins of all time. It was magnificent. We got the opportunity after a couple of years of negotiation to spend the night in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
You said a couple years of negotiation?
Yes, or otherwise known as a million cups of tea. Negotiating with each of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is controlled by 7 different churches who all control different parts of it. You have the Ethiopians on the roof, you have Egyptian Copts, you have the Syrians, you have the Franciscans, the Roman Catholics, and of course the Greek Orthodox and the Armenians. And basically, there are wonderful stories of efforts to change a light bulb in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which requires years of effort to be able to do, and often the intervention of the local municipal government to effect. So as you can imagine, laying cables and setting up lights inside this extraordinary cathedral, really, where you have the stone of unction, where it's believed Christ was laid after he was taken down from the cross, to the tomb that's built within the church. And we filmed there over the night. We did about 4 or 5 shots. We were down in the catacombs. We were filming this ancient Christian graffiti that's 1,700 years old, that's deep underneath the church.
Which I didn't even know was there. I didn't know that those ancient tombs were down there.
Well, between you and me, if we just don't tell anyone else, I didn't either. But it's amazing. You go down underneath the church and you will see along the slabs of rock, and you see it in the film, Christian crosses etched into the rock. And below that, even deeper, you find this depiction of a ship with a Latin verse underneath saying, "O Lord, we have come." And this, with archaeological DNA testing, has been dated to 1,700 years ago, before the church was built. And right next to this, you find a burial site, and you can see carved out rocky graves, which has been established by most archaeologists as a Jewish cemetery, and therefore the likely place that Jesus was buried. This is where we got to sleep overnight. And this is what we have brought back home to audiences in America and in 3D for the IMAX and giant screen.
Well, you also shot aerial footage over Jerusalem. How hard was that to get permission, given the security situation?
That was complicated. Low altitude aerials haven't the Israeli government hasn't allowed it for the last 20 years over the city of Jerusalem, because naturally you don't want odd-looking helicopters with big nose mounts with very large-looking cameras, or what could that be, flying low over one of the most contested pieces of real estate on Earth.
Sure.
So, in fact, we had to meet with about everybody you could possibly think of and more to get the permission to be able to do that. But even if we met with the military, the Air Force, the mayor of Jerusalem, the governor of East Jerusalem, the Islamic Waqf that controls the Al-Aqsa, even to the Jordanians too, whom we had to go and meet with, no one really ever says yes. You just sort of have to go for it. Even after all the sort of nods and verbal approvals, you just sort of have to go for it. And on the day that we were...
Yeah, but you can't go for it given that you could get shot down.
Well, one thing, what we did is we had to do press conferences before the day that we were shooting in both Arabic and in Hebrew to let everyone know in the city of Jerusalem...
all the residents.
...what was going on. But even... we had this sort of permission from all these different entities to go ahead, and pieces of paper and so on, but we were still grounded. We were still grounded when we had the helicopter there with the rotors going, and we had the Palm Sunday procession, and a procession of 1,000 monks was literally cresting the Mount of Olives on their way down to the ancient city of Jerusalem to represent when Jesus comes to Jerusalem before his crucifixion. Please, Lord, let us get this helicopter off the ground. We've been working for this for years, and actually we got it up there, and we had a half-minute shot, and it made it into the film, and it is extraordinary.
The film we're talking about is called Jerusalem. It's a 3D IMAX film. Taran Davies is one of the producers and co-founder of Cosmic Pictures. What would you say was the hardest permission to get? Was it getting that helicopter up?
No, I would actually say that the toughest place to get to, and the most exciting in a way, is onto the Temple Mount. Again, what the Muslims call Al-Aqsa, where the Dome of the Rock stands. Because to get that, you have to not only secure the permissions of the Israelis.
You mean to get into the mosque? I thought it was open.
Not exactly. No, not exactly. You need to have the permission. You need to have permission to go if you're filming, if you're making a film.
I see.
But even if you're not, it's not an easy place to get to. But if you're trying to make a film and you have a 50-foot crane and a 50-person team trying to go inside what is, I think, the oldest still standing Islamic shrine on earth, on top of the Temple Mount, Al-Aqsa, that you need to get the blessing of the Islamic Waqf, which is the Islamic council that controls access and what happens on top of this stone platform, the Temple Mount. And if you don't get their permission, you're not going to get the Israeli permission. So it's two levels of challenges and complications that we didn't always overcome. In the end, we got everything that we needed, but to be able to build the trust, I think, amongst the different communities that what we were doing and what we were trying to achieve is something that they could all be proud of. And I must say that the images that we brought back, when we did get the 50-foot crane and an IMAX camera the size of a car and a 50-person team into the Dome of the Rock, on top of the Al-Aqsa, I would question anyone to find more transcendent images of Jerusalem than those.
I wonder what impact Jerusalem has had on you personally. Obviously, you've been there a lot.
There's a funny story about Jerusalem, that there's a thing called the Jerusalem syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it happens to people who, I think there are about 200 people a year who end up having to visit a mental asylum in Jerusalem because they've had religious obsessions or something, and they get overcome and faint when they're in Jerusalem. Having spent as long as we have making this film about this extraordinary city, I've got to say that at the end of the day, you realize, sitting where I am now with you, that I know so little. There's so much more that there is to learn, and I hope that the film will serve in a way for others who might not think that this is relevant to them, that Jerusalem is relevant to them, but they go and they see this film and they realize that this is one of the most extraordinary cities on earth that has so much relevance and importance to our lives. What happens in Jerusalem will affect us all. And people's love for Jerusalem around the world is so powerful and so strong, and you feel it when you're walking along the stones through the ancient city. So I would say that all of us, all of our team, all of the filmmakers that have been involved with this have been really touched by this experience. And I hope that same power is within the film itself.
You were at Ground Zero on 9/11. What did you see that day?
That is, I couldn't say that I was at Ground Zero itself. I did that morning ride my bicycle around the World Trade Center, and I worked on Wall Street at the time, very close. And as many people were on such a day, they were doing the normal things that they do, and I was brushing my teeth when I heard the first plane hit and went out to investigate because I thought it was a truck, and walked down Greenwich Street and was about 3 blocks away when I saw the second plane hit. And all I can recall is just all the everything that was inside my face, all the liquid just draining away as the horror of what had happened settled in. And that was a very obviously formative experience for everyone. and for me too. And so at the time, I was making my films, and I was also on Wall Street, and I quit my job on Wall Street that day. And quite naturally, I went to Afghanistan to make a film. And I was in Afghanistan October and November 2001. And I made a film called Afghan Stories that premiered at the Venice Film Festival in September 2002.
And you also made a film about Mecca called Journey to Mecca. What's that about?
Journey to Mecca is an effort to, one of the wonderful things about IMAX, it's about taking you to places you otherwise can't go. And people think of, you go to the Antarctic or the Arctic or space or deep underwater, but you know that, of course, non-Muslims are not allowed into Mecca. So 80%...
Into the whole city, you mean?
Into the whole city. It's a sacred area where it's forbidden for non-Muslims to travel. Yet if we are expected to understand Islam, do we not have to go there? So Journey to Mecca, for me, was a way for us to be able to experience what goes on in Mecca, the Hajj, and the rituals that are performed by the Hajj. The Hajj is the longest running annual event in the longest running annual event in human history. It happens each year. 3, 4, 5 million pilgrims go each year and perform a series of rituals. And I wanted to know what it was all about and to experience that. And that is what is Journey to Mecca.
What's your next movie going to be about?
Oh, I'm still in Jerusalem.
Your heart's still there, huh?
My heart is still in Jerusalem. And you know what? These giant screen documentaries that are made for IMAX, these are works of love and passion. And they're a bit irregular as films go, because it's not Hollywood films and it's not regular theatrical docs. But these are very expensive projects that you need a team of crazy people to produce. And Jerusalem is such a labor of love. And so our producer team, my partners, George Duffield and Daniel Ferguson, on this, our focus is very much about making sure we can get it to as many museums and science centers as possible so as many people can share in this extraordinary experience that is Jerusalem.
The film is Jerusalem. Taran Davies is producer and co-founder of Cosmic Picture. He's one of the producers for that 3D film. It's distributed by National Geographic Entertainment. Taran, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you.